Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This is Kathy
Gaetan.
Gaetan, and today we have with us a wonderful, wonderful guest, Dr. Clive Wynne. Now, he's a Ph.D. I'm going to put this up here. He is a behavioral scientist with a fascination for dogs and their wild relatives, and also he is a psychology professor who directs the Canine Science Collaboratory at Arizona State University. Did I get that right?
That's right, Kathy. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you. And hi, Gaetan.
Hi, good morning. Nice to have you.
Well, we got you on our show because you have done some marvelous work, and I want to tell you the story about what happened and how we got involved. But first, I want to show a little bit about you so that people know what you're talking about. We're going to share a video, folks. And I know you know about our sharing our videos. What happens with us is with the God of technology, hopefully we're going to be able to get the video to work right. Okay, here we go, folks.
For years now, scientists have been trying to prove that dogs are really smart. Dogs go where people point. They sniff out explosives. 1 or 2 dogs can even understand hundreds of words. But the truth is, the secret to dog success isn't in their intelligence. It's in their ability to make friends. Dogs have an unprecedented, in fact, quite abnormal, enthusiasm for forming emotional bonds with members of other species. This is what makes dogs unique. Their extravagant, exuberant, unfettered, joyous ability to make friends with all kinds of other beings. Dogs really are all about love. Although this isn't what I think people expect to hear from me, I do find it satisfying that my science has forced me to recognize that my love of dogs, which for a long time felt immature and perhaps even embarrassing, is in fact the essence of the human-dog relationship.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yes, you did say it, yeah. Well, you know, the reason that I brought that I was showing that is because it's such a great opener as to what we're going to be talking about. You have written a book called Dog is Love, but before we get into talking about your book, I want to share with everyone about why did you want to specialize in being a canine cognition and behaviorist?
Well, sure, Kathy, that's a great question. I mean, I've been fascinated by the minds of other species for really pretty much as long as I can remember. Certainly once I got to college and didn't really know where I wanted to go, when I discovered that there was a whole science of understanding animal minds, I knew that that was for me. But I didn't immediately start with dogs. I trained as an animal psychologist. An animal psychologist, I mean, it goes back all the way to Pavlov. I mean, it goes back a long way. But for a long time, animal psychologists have been concentrating on just a couple of species that were easy to work with. And so I spent a number of years working with pigeons. And that's a species that animal psychologists have a long history with. And it was fascinating. There were all sorts of interesting questions that you could ask and get answers from pigeons about how they understand the world and how they reason and how they think. But there came a point where I just realized that this wasn't satisfying enough for me. There came a point where I knew that I wasn't just interested in animal minds for themselves, I was also interested in the human-animal relationships, what kinds of bonds people can have with other species and how that works from both sides. And when I came to that realization, I still didn't immediately recognize that I ought to be studying dogs. I spent a year or two wondering what to study and thinking about all sorts of different situations where people had relationships with animals. At one point, I thought I was going to write a book about people who have pet chimpanzees, for example, which is a really bad idea. Come to the point where I recognize that if you're interested in animal minds and you're interested in relationships between people and other species, you have to be studying the dog, because there is no other animal with which people have had a longer relationship or with which more people today share a more intimate relationship than our beloved dogs. And and I kind of feel mild embarrassment that it took me a long time to come to that point of realizing I needed to be studying dogs. But on the other hand, you know, I guess I'm lucky. Not everybody can go their whole career and find what they really need to be doing. So I've been studying the behavior of dogs and their wild relatives and in relationship to people for about 15 years now. And I just so love it. And every day I'm learning new astonishing things that even people who live their whole lives with dogs wouldn't have realized. So it's tremendous. I feel very lucky.
You know, I know that what some people had called you was Debbie Downer for a while.
Well, right. So Kathy, this was the early phase when I first started studying dogs and trying to understand what makes dogs special, what makes dogs unique, what is the secret of their success in human society. You know, there are 1 billion dogs on the surface of the planet, and they're on every continent except Antarctica. So they're a pretty successful species. And scientists there was a revival of interest in dogs at the end of the 20th century, in the late 1990s. And there were a number of scientists trying to get at this question, what is the secret of dog success? And the idea they came up with was that dogs had evolved a special form of intelligence. And when I started studying dogs and the dog-human relationship, I investigated this question of whether dogs have a special form of intelligence. And I came down against that idea. I do not believe that dogs have evolved any special form of intelligence. And when I came out with that idea, it made me seem like a rather negative kind of. There was a journalist writing a book about dogs, and he interviewed me, and he coined the term the Debbie Downer of cognition, which, you know, it stung a little bit because I love dogs so much and to be put in that kind of negative light. But on the other hand, if you're going to do science and you're going to go where the evidence takes you, sometimes that means that you end up in a place that, you know, people, you know, it has a negative tone to it. But that's all okay now, because the position that my dog Zephos, who's here with me, the position that Zephos led me to, that I explained in that very brief video clip that you showed, the idea that actually what makes dogs so successful in human society isn't intelligence. Okay, it's not that they're super smart, but it's that they have an amazingly powerful desire and capacity to form strong emotional bonds with members of other species. That turns out to be quite a happy conclusion to reach, and people are unlikely to call me Debbie Downer anymore, I think.
The Debbie Downer part I thought was very, very good, because it goes, you took all of the things that could have been negative, and then you've challenged it, and then you found out that your way of thinking was the correct way of thinking. So I actually looked at Debbie Downer as a positive.
Oh, well, great.
Just so that you know. I want to say hello to, let's see here. Do you know Liliana?
I don't think so.
Okay, nice. Oh, Speckles and I are watching. You know what I thought she said? Thought she said, hi, Speckles. I thought she was calling you Speckles.
I have a question. What was, in your initial research with dog, what was the aha moment for you when you say, oh, there's something there, and kind of a turning point? What was that point for you?
Well, so Gaetan, that's a great question, and there are several different points and places, but one absolutely crucial thing for me. So when I started studying dogs, we didn't actually have a dog of our own at home. I mean, I grew up around dogs, and I've had dogs at different points in my life, but because of international moves and a new baby, and we weren't sure, and we didn't have a dog for a while, and then 8 years ago now, we got this dog Zephos, who's with me now. And it was kind of strange, because I'm working with dogs when I'm at work, and I'm thinking about dogs when I'm at work, and I'm doing this as a scientist with a certain professional detachment. And then I come home to this dog, and she's certainly, she's not the smartest dog in the world. She won't. I'm saying. But my goodness, she is so affectionate. She is so loving. And for a while, I'm keeping these kind of concepts separate. I have my professional dog life and I have my personal dog life. And I don't expect them to be the same color, to follow the same theme.
Yeah.
And yet there comes a point where I think, well, my professional understanding of dogs has to include how I live with my own dog. That somehow has to fit into this. And so it was actually, honestly, Zephos who nudged me towards thinking about not dog smarts, but dog hearts, you know, about their capacity for affection. And so we had already actually done a couple of experiments that were beginning to show us that there was something remarkable about dogs' desire to be in loving relationships. But we hadn't, you know, you can get a scientific result and it can take you, and you can publish it and all the rest of it. And it can take you years to really see how that fits into a bigger picture. And so we'd already done one of my favorite experiments, which anybody watching, listening can easily do for themselves, which is you just separate yourself from your dog for a little while. 5-10 minutes is usually enough. And you set up a chair, and around that chair, you mark a circle of, we marked a circle of 1 meter, which is, you know, like 3 feet and a bit, around that chair. And then you have somebody, you sit in the chair, and you have somebody let the dog back into the room with you. And what we find is that most dogs, most of the time, we give them 2 minutes, 120 seconds. That's as simple as that. Just see what does the dog do for 2 minutes, let back into the room with their person. And we find that most dogs, most of the time, spend every last second of those 2 minutes inside the circle with their person. Their person is that important to them that that's what they do. And we work together with some hand-reared wolves out at Wolf Park in Indiana, which is a fantastic place where they've been hand-rearing wolves since 1974. So they really know what they're doing. And they have the most beautiful, the most noble animals who also have good relationships, especially with the people that raise them. But actually, they have several wolves that it's perfectly safe for members of the public to go in and interact with these animals. And so we repeated this experiment on the wolves. The wolves have people that they knew since they were little pups and that they've met with every day, so that the wolves really know some people. And we set up something for the person to sit on, and we marked the 1 meter circle around this seat, and we did the exact same experiment. And the wolves are interested in their people, but they typically spend about 30 seconds out of 2 minutes, about a quarter of the time. So we already had this very early experiment that was hinting that dogs have way more interest in the people that they love than even the most carefully hand-reared wolves have in their people. So these were the kind of experiments that were hinting in this direction. And Zephos told me, explain it to me. Simple language. Yeah.
A picture worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
And we have a video. Maybe we can show the video and continue the conversation. It's illustrate what you just said in your lab at the Arizona State University, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And okay, Kathy, I think you have the control there.
We're gonna bring that up.
Yeah.
And here we go.
This one's called the escape experiment. Will a dog act when their owner is in trouble?
Rescue. Help me.
Hearing his owner in distress, Ozzy heads straight for the box, circling and sniffing around, rescuing her within 11 seconds.
Well done, Ozzy. That's great. Hey, please just find your mum.
Well done.
Next, sociability test. In just 2 minutes, how much time does your dog actually want to spend close to you?
You can talk to him gently, pat him gently if he comes up real close to you. But if he doesn't choose to come up close to you, don't invite him in. Just leave him be. It's up to him to do whatever he wants to do.
Ozzy first greets his owner, then returns to her 3 times in between exploring the room before ultimately laying down right next to her.
What really stands out for me is this capacity to connect. That's what I think is really special about dogs.
Any dog owner knows this is true. Dog is love is out right now.
You know, I call it Velcro, the Velcro dog, the dogs that want to be with you all the time. Speaking of that, now in some of your research, didn't you say something about that? if a dog has a choice between being with their human or with food, that the dog will choose the human? Why is that?
Right. That's right, Kathy. But if people at home want to try this for themselves, the thing to keep in mind is that you need to create a circumstance, which is not that difficult, where the dog is equally deprived of food and of their person.
Okay, good point.
So, because typically people think of doing this in a situation where here I am, I'm me, and now I'm going to give the dog some food. And of course, the dog is going to take a great deal of interest in that food because they've got you already, right? They haven't been eating, but they have been with you. So we did this by setting up a circumstance which unfortunately is all too common, where a dog is left home alone while their person is out at work during the day. And we also arranged things so that the dog was not left with any food. So that we have a situation here where this poor dog has been alone for, let's say, 6, 7, 8 hours and has been without food for the same period of time. And then in the garage of the home, we set up equal distances from the door from the garage to the main house. We set up a bowl of food and the human, equal distances from the door. And we have an assistant make the door open so that now the door opens, and the dog is confronted by a choice. Do you want to have the food or do you want to be with your human? And what we find under those circumstances, nicely controlled, is that the dog always chooses the human. The dog is at that point much more concerned to greet their person than to eat some food. Now, as I say, that isn't how people would usually think of doing it. If I was to offer Zephos some food now, obviously she would get very, very excited about that food, and she would probably be willing to ignore me to eat the food.
Yeah.
You know, we're together the whole time here, whereas you know, there's no food with her right now. So so we had to think about a way of creating a circumstance so that the choice is fair. And when the choice is fair, most dogs, most of the time, would choose to go with their person.
Well, you brought up a very good point about dogs being left alone. I know that's one of your pet peeves, that people do that, because dogs are such loving animals. To leave them alone for a long period of time is really cruel.
Well, that's right, Kathy. So I mean, for this purpose of this study, I was willing to do this for a couple of days. But by and large, I think that leaving our dogs alone is the cruelest thing that people routinely do without realizing that they're being cruel. And I think that we take these loving beings into our homes precisely because we value their social nature, their friendly, loving nature. That's what attracts us to them, right? I mean, that's the point of having a dog for most of us. And then having done that, what do we do to them? We leave them in solitary confinement for hour after hour after hour.
In a cage sometimes.
Well, and then caged as well, which is really adding insult to injury in some cases. Not that I'm entirely against crating of puppies and so on. There can be a reason for that as a training thing. But I worry that people are we spend so little time with other species, with living beings from other species, that our way of interacting with our dogs is sometimes tending to be rather like the way we interact with our technology, right? I mean, the television in the next room is not getting lonely because I'm leaving it alone hour after hour after hour. And if I get up and leave this computer here and go somewhere else, the computer won't get lonely. You can turn these things off and walk away with a good conscience. But our dogs are not like that. Our dogs are not like that. You cannot just unplug the dog and put the dog in a box and assume that the dog will be fine and you'll come home and turn the dog back on and everything will be great. That's not how they work. They are highly social beings, and it's absolutely crucial that they're not asking for much after all. They're not asking, you know, they don't need fancy clothes. They don't need a car, right? Our dogs are not asking for much. They're just asking for our company or for somebody's company.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the case, because our dogs make friends, typically talking about a typical dog, make friends so easily and make friends with many different species. It's not essential that it be you. You don't have to be home with your dog every moment of the day. And there's no reason why your dog cannot be alone for some of the day. But if you do have, as so many people do, a work life, a professional life, where you have to be out for 8, 9, 10 hours of the day, you need to think about how to help your dog deal with this. And, you know, there are possibilities. You may have friends who are themselves dogless but love dogs and would like to spend time with your dog and can pop round. You can pay people to do the same thing. And there are doggy daycares around the country. I mean, dogs can get value from the company of others of their own species. There's very little governmental control in the US over these organizations, so you need to do your own due diligence. But there are definitely good doggy daycares around that could help with these kinds of things.
You did some research which involves shelter and break from the shelter. Can you talk a little bit about that study you did?
Sure, Gaetan. Well, actually, in fact, in terms of hours of effort, most of our research involves dogs in shelters. We've done a lot of projects over the years because I think that I need to take my skills to the place where dogs need our help the most. And the shelter world is the most difficult place for dogs through no fault of the wonderful people who work in them. So right now, for example, I have a team of people going around the country helping shelters to institute foster programs. So we have funding from Maddie's Fund, and we previously did a research project for them demonstrating that fostering really helps shelter dogs. The dogs cheer up, their behavior gets better, and their chances of adoption improve. And even though fostering is short-term, meaning that a dog may well end up having to go back into the shelter, it's still been a good experience for them that they were out for some time. And so now, having shown that fostering is a good thing, we're now going around the country, and our plan, our ambition here, with help from Maddie's Fund, is to help 100 shelters across the country to institute fostering programs. So it's a really big deal, and we're very grateful to them for the funding to make that possible. But that's just one of many, many things over the years that we've done in shelters.
Well, we have a video on that. Can we share that with you? And you can tell us who this woman is?
Yeah. So this is Lisa Gunther, who did her PhD with me and is now my postdoc, my colleague, leading the Maddie's fostering project. Okay, let's hear from Dr. Wynne what they had to say about this wonderful project.
So I'm Clive Wynne. I'm a professor of psychology at ASU and the director of the Canine Science Collaboratory.
I'm Lisa Gunther. I'm the Maddie's Fund Research Fellow at Arizona State University and also in the Canine Science Collaboratory.
And we just published a study on the impact of temporary fostering on the welfare of dogs that live in shelters.
And so our study got started at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary in Kanab, Utah. And one of the things that's kind of awesome about our work is that we get to try to understand how different types of programs and shelters benefit the lives of dogs there. And so this program began there. They had a program called Sleepovers, which is just one night away. And that's how we got started learning more about this program.
Yeah, so there are a few shelters around the country that thought it was a good idea to send dogs, especially their long stay dogs, home to people for maybe just one night of sleepover or maybe a couple of nights a weekend. And this has been catching on gradually around the country, but nobody had done a systematic analysis to see whether it actually does the dogs any good, because intuitively it seems like a good thing, right? The dog's sort of in prison, and when you send the dog to somebody for fostering, you're sort of sending them home, and that seems like a benefit to their lives. But from other things that people have studied, it wasn't necessarily clear that it would have the positive impacts that you'd expect, because there are studies on laboratory animals like rats in cages and so on that show that if a stressful situation comes and goes, that's actually on balance a worse situation than if you're just living with the same stress day in, day out. So that's what motivated this study.
I think there was also thoughts in animal sheltering that would the dogs feel poorly when they returned, that they thought they were being adopted, and then sadly they had to return to the animal shelter. So I think that there was some was sort of a couple different reasons why we decided to go after this question. That's the one thing about dogs, we can't ask them, so how was your stay? Was it relaxing? You know, how would you rate the home? So we asked these questions by using cortisol, which is a hormone that is involved in the stress response. And we also had the dogs wearing these doggy Fitbits that record their activity levels and particularly their sleep.
Yeah, and this was done at 5 shelters around the country. It started, the inspiration came from Best Friends in Canab, Utah. but then it was done.
Arizona Humane Society of Western Montana, Lifeline Animal Project at DeKalb County, and then the SPCA of Texas.
Yeah, so we get a good wide-ranging picture. And the outcome is, wherever you are in the country, at least these 5 places, it really does help the dogs. They are definitely in a better place while they're being fostered. It's definitely a benefit to them. We see the stress hormone levels going down. We see them sleeping a great deal. That seems to be a major part of it. The shelter is a noisy, difficult environment. It's hard for them to get a good night's sleep. When they go home, they sleep a lot, they're rested. And then when they go back to the shelter on Monday or whatever it is, they bounce back to where they were before, but it's no worse than it was before. So they get a real break and there's no downside to it. So it's a definite advantage for them.
I think one other thing that we saw with the sleep was that actually when they come back, they're sleeping longer than when they were in the beginning. And I think that's something that we think is important in terms of for their behavior in the kennel, that sometimes when folks see dogs in the shelter that are bouncing off the walls, that are moving a lot, that are doing behaviors that have been associated with not being adopted, we think that the idea of the dogs being able to be rested and relaxed could benefit their adoption options.
So it's sort of like a doggy vacation.
Yeah.
You know, and then you go back to the daily grind of work, but you're well rested.
I think I hadn't thought of putting it that way.
Yeah.
But I think conceptualizing it as a doggy vacation is a really good way to think about it. That the dog gets a real break, is really refreshed, and okay, they have to go back to work on Monday, but they're in a refreshed place when they go back. That's good.
Like a weekend for the work week.
Yeah.
Dog vacations. Whoops. Dog vacations. Perfect. I love it. We talk a lot about shelters here. The notion of having a dog just overnight or for dinner or not, I was going to say the holidays, and I'm going to take that back. Not that you shouldn't have them at the holidays, but there's so much going on with kids and everything that if the dog is really going to have a vacation, they should be able to relax.
Yeah.
So now we have the ultimate question here for you, Doctor. Do dogs really love us?
Well, Kathy, so does the short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. And in my book, Dog is Love, I talk about how there's science at many, many different levels. There's all the way down to the deepest level of biology, which is the genetic code. There are mutations in dog DNA that make them so loving. And we did that research. We compared dogs and wolves on this very simple test of friendliness. And then we had a geneticist collaborator look at their DNA, and she was able to identify 3 genes that mutated in the journey from wolf to dog, which are actually responsible for the dog's super friendly nature. And hormones, there's a sort of a love hormone, which responds. Heart, there's a study showing that dogs and people's hearts beat together, which is unbelievably sweet. 2 hearts literally beating as one. Brain scans, there's a professor at Emory in Atlanta, Georgia, who has trained dogs to lie still in brain scanners, so you can see how their brains are activated when you tell them that their beloved human is nearby. So at many, many levels of analysis, we see how dogs are primed, not just to love people, right? So I often say, and people often say, dogs are primed or ready, engaged to love people. But actually, that's to give ourselves too much credit. So dogs are primed by their biology, by their evolution, to love members of other species. What that other species might be depends on what kinds of beings they meet when they're young. So because we are humans, we see and meet dogs who love human beings. Of course we do. But I went out to a goat ranch in the northeast of Arizona here, and there they have livestock guarding dogs. They have dogs who take care of the goats and who show all the signs of affection towards goats that we're used to seeing dogs show towards us. And that's simply because those dogs, when they were pups, they were put with goats. And so they develop a bond towards the goats. Those particular dogs also love people because that's how those ranchers wanted them to be. But there are some ranchers who want the dogs to be completely self-sufficient. And so they keep away from the pups when they're young and just have the pups with the livestock that they want them to be taken care of. So so yeah, dogs love people, and dogs will love other things too if you give them half a chance.
Yeah. Well, you know, this the reason that we wanted you on the show is I want to share with everybody what happened. There was an article that you wrote. I'm going to share this here with us. An article. Let's see here. Share to the stream, but we want this here. We want all of us. It was called "The Dog's Secret Power: Not Intelligence but Love." And when I posted it, I didn't realize that we would have such great response. Well, we had almost a 500,000 people that had seen it, and they really wanted it. And the purpose is because everyone believes that, yes, we do love our dog, but do we really know that they love us? Because most people feel it's because they either want a treat or whatever. But a dog would truly, really rather have a touch than a treat.
Well, that's right. That's right. I mean, what I say. I mean, people. If you want to be skeptical about whether your dog loves you, that's your prerogative. You know, there are people who don't think anybody loves them. Yeah, that's their prerogative, right? I mean, there's no way ultimately of knowing if your wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, son, mother, whatever. There's no ultimate way of knowing. Anybody could be faking it, and your dog could be faking it. But what I say is, if you're willing to believe that anybody in your life loves you, then your dog loves you. Because you have no right to be more skeptical about your dog's love for you than you have to be about the love that anybody else around you appears to show towards you. If anybody loves you, your dog loves you. Don't you, sweet?
So why did you write the book?
Well, because I wanted people to know this. It's a discovery. I mean, a lot of people have this sense that their dog probably loves them, but to be able to take something like this and to take the tools of science, which give us more reliable knowledge than just our intuitions, and show that the tools of science come down on the side that, yeah, your dog really does love you. And I think that's emotionally satisfying to be able to know that, to be able to share that with the confidence that the scientific method gives us, and because of the implications that it has for how we live with our dogs. As we were saying, that people are leaving their dogs alone far too much, and to recognize that our dogs have emotional needs and that we need to be doing what we can to fulfill those needs for them, because they give us so much, and they're not asking, as I said already, they're not asking for a lot. We ought to do what we can to do.
You do a scientific research, and I read somewhere about chemical, physiological transformation that support the theory that the dog love. Can you share a little bit of these facts at the research level?
Sure, Gaetan. So I think what you're talking about is research primarily out of Japan. And I visited their facility in the suburbs of Tokyo. And I was really, really envious because, like me, they do simple behavioral studies on dogs. But they also have the kind of lab where you can analyze the hormones in an individual's body. And there's a hormone called oxytocin that people call the love hormone. It was first discovered in the body. It's released when mothers are nursing their babies. And it's since been found that in many very intensely loving situations, so like newly enamored couples, not old married couples, you see this release of oxytocin into the bloodstream when two individuals, very loving individuals, look into each other's eyes. And these Japanese researchers, they trained dogs to pee on command, because you can analyze it in urine, in pee. And so they brought people and their dogs together, and they had them just look at each other, and then they analyzed the levels of this hormone, oxytocin, in the body of the human and of the dog. And what they find is that when a person and a dog who truly love each other are together and looking into each other's eyes, the levels of oxytocin on both sides go up. So it's absolutely, absolutely the most charming, most beautiful finding you could ask for. And there it is, right in the body of both sides.
The proof is in the pudding.
Sorry.
The proof is in the scientific
test.
Yes. That's amazing.
We have a comment from one of our fans, Doctor. This is going back to what you were talking about before. She said a very good point about the long hours alone. I believe you mentioned in other podcasts that in the Nordic country, there is a law for it, how long they can be alone and how long they can be alone in the house. Supported to introduce this overall.
Yeah.
Thanks, Danielle.
So that's quite right. In Sweden, the law prohibits leaving your dog home alone for more than 4 hours at a stretch.
Really?
And I don't think there would really be much purpose in the United States to introduce a law like that. It's hard to imagine how it could be enforced. But I think that every dog owner, every person who lives and loves their dog, should stop and think about this and should strive towards something like that. I mean, of course, all of us have those disastrous days where the car breaks down or whatever, and you just can't do it. And that, fair enough. But I think especially if you don't have a dog and you'd really like one and you're thinking about getting one, look at your life critically and think about, does your life have a dog-shaped space in it? And then also think about what kind of a dog would fit into the kind of life that you lead. As a professor, of course, I meet a great many students, wonderful young people, and the ones who come and talk to me are usually pretty interested in dogs. But if they're thinking about getting a dog, I almost always try and talk them out of it, because think about it, you're 19, you're 20, you're at college, your days are really packed, and you work hard, and then oftentimes your evenings and your nights are pretty packed too. They work hard in the day and they play hard in the night. Where does a dog fit into that? You're not taking your dog, certainly my university, you're not allowed to take your dog into the classrooms, so your dog would have to be home alone during the day, and you're not taking the dog to the bars and the nightclubs in the night either. So
Yeah.
a dog that they might have would be mostly alone unless they have some other arrangement. So generally speaking, it's not a phase of life that a dog fits easily into, and so I don't encourage them by and large. I think it's important to critically assess what your life is like and how a dog would fit into it. I'm very lucky, here I am, you see me in my home office, which is where I am a lot of the time. And Zephos has her bed in the corner, and we chat from time to time. It's a very privileged existence, but not everybody has this.
Well, you have a video on puppies as well. Let's show that, which kind of goes along with what we're talking about here.
Optimal age. Is there a perfect age of puppy cuteness? Millions of people throughout the United States and elsewhere have dogs in their homes that they love, like I love Zephos. And, you get the impression your dog loves you back, don't you, sweetie? It's such a strong emotional bond. And so I couldn't help wondering, well, where does it come from? This little study with the photographs of the pups of different ages, I think it does give us an insight into where the origin is of this affection between people and dogs, and that it is something that's quite deep and quite important for dogs, that being able to engage us, that is the secret of their success. So we had a rich set of photographs of 3 quite diverse looking breeds of dogs. And we just sat people down at a computer terminal where they would see the photographs. And as each photo came up, they just had a slider along the bottom and they had to tell us how attractive they thought that dog pup was. So around 7 or 8 weeks of age, just as their mother is getting sick of them and is going to kick them out of the den, and they're going to have to make their own way in life, at that age, that is exactly when they are most attractive to human beings. So it fitted together precisely as I hoped it would, which is really cool. The 8-week point is just the point where the hook is biggest. The ability of the animal to grab our interest is strongest. But having grabbed our interest, we continue to love them all their lives, don't we? She's as lovely to me now as she ever was. She doesn't lose her loveliness.
What a beautiful dog.
She is gorgeous. I'd forgotten that video. That's a nice video. Such good shots of Zephos.
Yeah. Well, okay, now, Doctor, we just have a couple of people here have just said, let's see. Gail says, great show, guys. Welcome. And okay, we showed the others. All right, now, what can we do to help dogs, and what would you like people to know about dogs that they have not known? That'll be our last question.
Okay. Well, that's a great question. So I already said that I think, we love our dogs for being so loving, and we need to reciprocate that, not by hugging them once a day. Not every dog even likes being hugged, but by being with them, by giving them company. It doesn't necessarily have to work. The other thing is when we're trying to control our dogs, change their behavior so that they don't bark at the mailman or whatever. It never helps to bring violence and pain into the life of your dog. Whatever you need to train your dog to do or not do can always be achieved by positive methods. Shock collars, choke chains, they're never necessary. They're never necessary. Let's be gentle with each other, right? And then I think let's stick to those 2 points, because I think those are the most important take-home points. Mm-hmm. Let's be our dogs' gentle leaders. Let's provide compassionate, gentle leadership as we strive to with our children. Let our dogs want and need the same, and get the best. You get the best outcomes in that way. Mm-hmm. Protect them from loneliness. Those would be my 2 take-home things.
That's a very great point. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, also for commenting. Okay, Doctor. Well, I know that you have to go. Your time is limited. So I want to say that in the event that somebody wants to know about additionally, for more information, you can go to your website, which I think you want to have it as dogislovebook.com. Is that correct?
That's right. It's the same website as they would get by typing in clivewynne.com, but they don't have to remember how to spell my name.
Right, yeah. This is the website, folks. Yeah. Okay, well, we want to thank you so much for being on the show. It was absolutely fabulous. And we also have a link in the description for those of you that would like to order his book, Dog is Love. And here's the book, Dog is Love. So please feel free to get your copy. And we're going to have Dr. Wynne back on the show very shortly, because there's so many things that you have done that have just we're so enthralled with. I want to thank you very, very much. So thank you, Doctor, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Whoops. You was about to say something.
Sometime.
I'm sorry. What were you going to say? What?
I was just saying thank you. I really enjoyed myself, Kathy Gaetan. It was great. I look forward to chatting again.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, that was what a great dynamic, huh?
What
Charlie, please, Mama's on the show. Yes.
And we're live, and people hear you.
Live. Oh, who knows with him? I don't know. All right. So now let's see. Now,
before we close, I would like to say hello to Sebastian in Australia. There's a lot of fire there. It's a pretty dramatic situation. So our hearts are with you guys in Australia. And if you want to make donation, the public can go to the Red Cross Australia, and they can make donation there for Australia. We have audience around the world. We have some friend in Australia. So just kudos to Australia.
Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
Yep.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yep. And talk to you very soon, and see you soon.
Okay.
Your feedback are always welcome. And if you find anything interesting to the show, tell your friend.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.